He asked for her number. She handed him the dessert menu. The Korean Mafia boss who controlled Seoul's underground just got rejected by a waitress, and witnesses couldn't believe what they were seeing. While billion-won heiresses threw themselves at Suk Myung-soo, Desiree Coleman said, "I don't date customers without blinking." His associates expected violence. His rivals expected humiliation. Instead, he came back the next night, and the night after that, because the only thing more dangerous than a powerful man's anger is his fascination with a woman who won't play his game. If you believe people should be valued for their character, not their wallet or their weapons, hit subscribe. Only arrogant, power-hungry types won't. Comment where you're watching from if you think respect should be earned, not demanded. Let's prove that integrity matters more than intimidation. Now, let's see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable woman. The Constellation was Seoul's most expensive restaurant, perched on the 63rd floor where the city sprawled below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Crystal chandeliers caught light and split it into rainbows. Waiters moved like ghosts in perfect choreography. Every detail whispered exclusivity, from the imported Italian marble to the sommelier who spoke 7 languages. This was where Seoul's elite came to see and be seen, where deals worth millions happened over wagyu and wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. And at the center table, commanding the room without speaking, sat Suk Myung-soo. 34 years old, 6'1" of controlled violence, wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. Hair swept back sharp enough to cut. Tattoos hidden beneath expensive fabric. A dragon curling up his spine. Characters along his ribs that spelled out his dead brother's name. Eyes like black ice that had watched men beg and bleed. The 3rd-generation heir to the Suk family, an organization that controlled everything from construction contracts to political campaigns, from nightclub districts to the judges who looked the other way. He didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to gesture. His presence bent the room's gravity toward him. Women watched him from behind wine glasses and false laughter. The socialite at table 7 had worn that dress, specifically hoping he'd notice. The actress at table 12 had her publicist call ahead to ensure she'd be seated in his eye line. Even the married businesswoman at table 4 found excuses to walk past his table, perfume trailing like bait. Suk Myung-soo noticed none of them. His attention was elsewhere. On the waitress who'd just delivered bread to table 9 without once glancing his direction. Desiree Coleman, 28 years old, 5'7" of controlled grace in the standard black and white uniform that somehow looked tailored to her dark skin. Natural hair pulled back in a sleek bun. No jewelry except small gold hoops. Posture perfect, movements efficient, face professionally neutral. She'd been working at the Constellation for 4 months, and in that time, she'd somehow remained invisible to his radar until tonight, until his associate mentioned her. The American one, Kim had said during dinner setup. She turned down an invitation to Mr. Park's yacht party. Just said, "I don't mix work and pleasure," and walked away. Park was furious. Park was a real estate mogul who thought his money purchased access to anything. The fact that a waitress had declined him was already interesting. The fact that she'd done it without fear or flirtation made it fascinating. Suk Myung-soo watched her now as she took an order from table 11. Competent, calm, completely focused on her work. No hair flipping, no extra smile for male customers, no performance. Just excellence delivered with indifference to everything except the task at hand. When she finally approached his table, it was with the same energy she'd bring to any customer. No nervousness, no recognition of who he was. Just professional courtesy. "Good evening. Have you decided on your wine pairing, or would you like a few more minutes?" Her voice carried traces of the American South buried beneath years of city sharpness. Honey hardened into something that could cut if you pressed too hard. She met his eyes directly, waiting for his answer with the patience of someone who had other tables to manage and no time for games. "What would you recommend?" he asked, voice soft, testing. "That depends on your meal selection and your palate preferences. The sommelier can provide detailed pairings if you'd like expert guidance. Professional deflection. Competent but distant. I'd like your opinion." Now her expression shifted slightly, not flustered but measuring, like she was deciding whether he was wasting her time or genuinely asking. "I'm not a sommelier," she said evenly. But if you're having the aged beef, the 2015 Barolo is excellent. If you want something that won't overshadow the food, the Burgundy is safer. If you want to impress your guests, the Chateau Margaux is expensive enough that they'll assume it's good whether they can taste the difference or not. The honesty landed like slap. His associate stiffened. Across Seoul, people crafted careful compliments around Suk Myung-soo's preferences. No one called out the performance of wealth. No one suggested his guests might not have refined palates. He felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Interest. Real interest. The Barolo, he decided. And what brought you to Seoul? She wrote down his wine selection with precise efficiency. The job market. Then she moved to his associate. And for you, sir? No elaboration. No flirtation. No acknowledgement that he'd asked a personal question. She finished taking their orders and walked away, her attention already on the next table. Suk Myung-soo watched her go, noting the way other waiters automatically deferred to her despite her relatively short tenure. The way the hostess checked with her about table assignments. The way she moved through the space like she owned it through competence rather than title. Should I have her replaced? Kim asked quietly, mistaking Suk's attention for displeasure. No. The word came out sharper than intended. I want her full employment file on my desk tomorrow. Kim's eyebrows rose fractionally, but he nodded. In their world, curiosity about a woman usually ended one of two ways, in his bed or in his debt. But something about Desiree Coleman suggested she'd accept neither. The rest of dinner progressed with its usual choreography. Business discussed in coded language. Alliances confirmed over dessert. Money and power redistributed with handshakes and knowing looks. The Constellation staff moved around them like water around stones, essential but invisible. Except Desiree. Suk Myung-soo found his attention returning to her throughout the meal. The way she defused a drunk customer at table 6 without calling security, her voice remaining level while her body language communicated absolute boundaries. The way she corrected a newer waiter's mistake without embarrassment, simply fixing the problem and moving on. The way she declined a business card from a corporate executive, saying, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in career changes at this time, with the same tone she'd used to decline dessert. She operated in his world, but refused to be of it. When the check came, 30 million won for 5 people, tip included, she processed it with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. No false gratitude for the generous tip. No performance of appreciation. Just, thank you for dining with us this evening. Please come again. As if she didn't care whether he did or not. As Suk Myung-soo left that night, stepping into the cold Solaire where his driver waited with the engine running, he realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had treated him like he was ordinary. Like his power was irrelevant. Like money and fear and influence were just noise she'd learned to tune out. It felt like being seen and dismissed simultaneously. He should have been insulted. Instead, he was intrigued. His phone buzzed with the usual messages, reports from his district managers, requests for meetings, confirmations that certain problems had been handled. The machinery of his empire running smoothly as always. Everything in its place. Everyone playing their role. Except one waitress who refused to play at all. Sir. His driver's voice pulled him back. Where to? Suk Myung-soo glanced back at the constellation. 63 floors up where lights still glowed golden against the night sky. Home, he said finally, but he was already planning his return. If you can't stand people who think their money and power puts them above everyone else, comment respect is earned, not bought. Subscribe if you believe Desiree should stay strong and not fall for intimidation tactics. Only power-drunk bullies would disagree. Let's see what Suk does next when rejection becomes obsession. The file arrived at Suk Myung-soo's office at 9 a.m. sharp. Desiree Marie Coleman, 28, born in New Orleans, raised in Atlanta. Bachelor's degree in international business from Spelman College. Worked in luxury hospitality in New York for 3 years before relocating to Seoul 18 months ago. Current residence, a modest apartment in Yongsan-gu. No criminal record. No debt. No apparent vices. Emergency contact. Her mother, still living in Atlanta. The parts that interested him weren't in the official file. She'd left the United States after a relationship ended badly. An engagement broken when she discovered her fiancé had been using her connections to build his career while sabotaging hers. She'd arrived in Seoul knowing only basic Korean, learned the language fluently in 6 months, and worked her way from a small cafe to the Constellation through pure competence. She sent money home monthly, volunteered at an expat community center on Sundays, kept to herself otherwise. She'd built a life from nothing in a foreign country, asking no one for help. Suk Myung-soo found himself reading the file 3 times, looking for weaknesses he could exploit, angles he could work. But Desiree had constructed her world carefully, with no obvious vulnerabilities, no gambling debts, no family members he could pressure, no desperate ambitions he could dangle like bait. She was frustratingly, completely self-contained. He returned to the Constellation the next evening. Same table, different associates for cover, though they knew better than to question his sudden interest in fine dining. When Desiree approached with menus, her expression showed the faintest flicker of recognition before settling back into professional neutrality. "Good evening. Welcome back." "The Barolo was excellent," he said. "Your recommendation was perfect." "I'm glad you enjoyed it." No pleasure in the compliment, no fishing for more. Just acknowledgement. She handed out menus with practiced efficiency. "Today's specials include..." "Have dinner with me." The word surprised even him. Suk Myung-soo didn't ask, he commanded, suggested, arranged. But something about her demanded a direct approach. Desiree's hand paused fractionally before continuing to distribute menus. "I don't date customers. Can I start you with drinks, or would you like a few minutes?" "I'm not asking for a date. I'm offering an opportunity to eat something better than whatever you have at home." Now she looked at him fully, really looked at him, and he saw the intelligence behind her professional mask, calculating, measuring, deciding. "Mr. Suk, I appreciate the offer, but I maintain clear boundaries between my professional and personal life. It's how I stay excellent at my job." She turned to his associates. "Gentlemen, what can I get you to drink?" Dismissed. Politely but absolutely. His associates ordered quickly, clearly uncomfortable. After Desiree left, Kim leaned forward. "Sir, if she's being disrespectful..." "She's being honest." Suk Myung-soo cut him off. "There's a difference." But Kim's question had planted something. In Suk's world, disrespect required response. Boundaries required testing. People who refused to play the game needed to be reminded that everyone played eventually, they just didn't know it yet. He started returning 3 times a week, always requesting Desiree's section, always leaving generous tips that she accepted with the same neutral "thank you" she gave everyone, always watching her move through the restaurant like a woman who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable. During the 3rd week, he noticed something. A regular customer, a real estate developer named Choi, had started timing his dinners to coincide with Desiree's shifts. Choi was 50, married, wealthy enough to think money erased boundaries. Suk watched him corner Desiree near the bar, standing too close, touching her arm while she tried to take his order. The professional smile on her face never wavered, but her body language screamed discomfort. She extracted herself gracefully, something about checking on his wine selection. But Choi's expression as he watched her walk away made Suk's jaw tighten. He recognized that look. Possession before ownership. Entitlement before consent. When Desiree returned to Suk's table, he asked quietly, "How long has Choi been bothering you?" Her mask slipped for just a moment, surprised that he'd noticed, wariness about why he cared. "I handled difficult customers regularly. It's part of the job." "That's not what I asked." She set down his wine with controlled precision. 3 weeks. He's persistent, but hasn't crossed any legal lines, so management considers it a customer service challenge, rather than harassment. The bitterness in her voice was carefully contained, but unmistakable. "Would you like it stopped?" Now her eyes met his directly, searching. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I don't like watching predators hunt in my presence." "Your presence?" She almost smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Mr. Suk, you don't own this restaurant. You're just another customer here, same as him." The words should have insulted him. Instead, they cemented his fascination. "Fair enough, but the offer stands." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Accept help and owe him something. Refuse help and deal with Choi alone. Both options cost her the independence she'd fought to maintain. I'll handle it myself, she said finally, but I appreciate your concern. She walked away before he could respond, and Suk found himself frustrated by her refusal and impressed by her consistency simultaneously. 2 days later, Choi didn't show up for his usual reservation. Suk's associate reported that Choi had received a visit from some business partners who'd suggested he find a new favorite restaurant. No threats, just strong recommendations about respecting boundaries and avoiding situations that could become complicated. When Desiree approached Suk's table that evening, she set down his water with a look that wasn't quite gratitude and wasn't quite accusation. You said you'd leave it alone. I said the offer stood. I didn't say I'd wait for you to accept it. That's not how respect works. Her voice was low, controlled, but he heard the anger underneath. You don't get to make decisions for me just because you think you know better. I made a decision about Choi, not about you. Same thing. She pulled out her notepad with sharp, precise movements. What can I get you for dinner, Mr. Suk? He wanted to explain that he'd seen Choi's type escalate before, that waiting for her permission while she was being harassed was a luxury she couldn't afford. But he recognized that explaining would only prove her point, that he thought he knew her situation better than she did. The beef. And Desiree. He waited until she looked at him. I'm sorry. You're right. I overstepped. The apology seemed to surprise her more than anything else he'd done. Her expression softened fractionally. Thank you for that. And thank you for handling Choi, even though you shouldn't have done it without asking. It was the first personal thing she'd said to him that wasn't a deflection or a boundary. A tiny crack in the wall. He should have been satisfied with that small victory. Instead, he found himself wanting more. If you believe nobody should manipulate others for their own good, even with good intentions, hit subscribe. Comment my choice, my control, if you think Desiree has every right to be angry. Only controlling, manipulative people would side with Suk's decision to interfere. Let's see if he learns respect or just gets more obsessed. Seoul's winter arrived with brutal efficiency, the kind of cold that turned breath to fog and made the city's steel and glass towers look even more unforgiving. The constellation's warmth became more inviting, its golden light a promise against the dark streets below. Suk Myung-soo's visits had become routine. 3 times a week, same table, same section. The staff had stopped whispering about it. Even Desiree had settled into a rhythm with him, professional courtesy with occasional flashes of actual conversation when the restaurant was slow. He'd learned small things, that she missed New Orleans food but hated the humidity, that she'd taught herself Korean by watching dramas with subtitles and practicing with grocery store clerks, that she had a younger brother studying engineering at Morehouse, that her mother sent care packages with hot sauce and pralines that Desiree shared with the kitchen staff. She'd learned things about him too, though he suspected she'd researched more than he'd volunteered. She never asked about his business directly, but sometimes her eyes would catch the news on the restaurant's bar television, reports about construction bid scandals or district violence, and she'd look at him with a question she never voiced. One night in mid-December, she surprised him. Why do you keep coming here? She asked while clearing his dessert plate. The restaurant was nearly empty, just 2 other tables lingering over wine. The food is excellent. Seoul has 50 restaurants with excellent food and better views. You come here for something else. Her directness still caught him off guard, even after 2 months. Maybe I like the service. You like that I don't fawn over you, she corrected. But I still don't understand why. Men like you, powerful men, usually prefer people who recognize their status. Men like me, he repeated. What kind of man do you think I am? Desiree set down the empty plates, considering her answer. For once, she seemed to be engaging rather than deflecting. Dangerous. Controlled. Someone who's used to getting what he wants through fear or money or both. But also, she paused, searching for words. Someone who's tired of it. The performance. The game. Like you come here because it's the one place where you can just be a customer. The accuracy of her observation hit harder than he expected. She'd seen something he barely admitted to himself. that these dinners had become an escape from the constant calculation of his real world, a place where he could eat good food and talk to someone who treated him like a person instead of a weapon or a wallet. And you? He turned the question back. What kind of woman walks away from an engagement, moves across the world alone, and refuses every offer of help or advancement? Her expression closed slightly, walls rising. Someone who learned that depending on others means giving them power over your life. That sounds lonely. That sounds safe, she corrected. Then softer. But yes, sometimes lonely. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and rare. Before either could say more, the restaurant manager appeared, apologetic but firm. Ms. Coleman, there's a situation at the host stand. Your Korean is better than mine for this. Desiree excused herself, and Suk watched her handle whatever crisis had emerged, a customer angry about wait times from the raised voices. She defused it in under 2 minutes, switching between English and Korean with impressive fluency, finding a solution that left everyone satisfied. When she returned, he said, "You're wasted here." "Excuse me." "Your skills. Your intelligence. You could run this restaurant, not just serve tables." Her smile was sad and knowing. "Mr. Suk, I'm a Black American woman in Seoul. I'm already lucky to work here. Management positions require connections I don't have and trust one haven't earned. I'm exactly where my qualifications and circumstances allow. I could change that." "I know you could." She met his eyes steadily. "That's why I won't let you." "Why not?" "Because then I'd owe you. And the kind of debts powerful men create aren't paid with money." The implication was clear. She thought he was circling toward an eventual proposition, help with her career in exchange for something more personal. It should have insulted him. Instead, it made him realize how many times he'd seen exactly that transaction play out in his world. What if I promised no strings attached? "Mr. Suk, in my experience, powerful people don't do favors without expecting something back. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually. And I've worked too hard to own my life to give pieces of it away, even to people who might mean well." She was protecting herself from him, from his world, from the corruption that seeped into everything he touched. She was right to. "Okay," he said quietly. "No offers. No interference. Just conversation when you have time." Desiree studied him with those careful, measuring eyes. "Just conversation. Just conversation. Then conversation I can do." She smiled slightly, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "When my shift ends in 20 minutes, the staff usually gets 1 drink at the bar. You're welcome to join if you want. Fair warning, we mostly complain about difficult customers and debate about food." It was an invitation, freely offered with no obligation attached. The first genuine gesture of welcome she'd given him. Suk Myung-soo felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and unfamiliar. "I'd like that." That night, for the first time in years, he stayed somewhere not because of business or strategy, but because someone had invited him to simply exist in their presence without performing power or wealth or danger. He sat at the bar with Desiree and 3 other servers, drinking whiskey and listening to stories about kitchen disasters and customer absurdities. No one treated him with fear or special deference. Desiree introduced him as Mr. Suk, one of our regulars, without mentioning his family name or reputation. For 2 hours, he was just another person. Just another customer who'd stayed past closing because the staff had been kind enough to include him. When he finally left, Desiree walked him to the elevator, the restaurant dark behind them except for security lights. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Thank you for being normal," she countered. "That version of you is much better than the one who tries to solve my problems without asking." "Noted." He pushed the elevator button, then hesitated. "Desiree, if I wanted to know you better, not as a customer, not through favors or obligations, just as someone interested in who you are, what would that look like?" She considered the question seriously. "Coffee, public places, daytime, equal footing. No gifts, no interference in my job, no using your connections to help me. Just 2 people talking, both free to walk away whenever they want." "That sounds fair." "That sounds safe," she corrected, echoing her earlier words. "Which is the only way this could work, if it works at all." The elevator arrived. Suk stepped in, turned back to face her. "Coffee, then." This Sunday. This Sunday, she agreed. There's a cafe in Itaewon. Neutral territory. I'll text you the address. As the elevator descended, Suk Myung-soo realized he'd just agreed to the most powerless position he'd occupied in years, equal footing with someone who owed him nothing and wanted nothing from him. It should have felt like weakness. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in decades. If you believe real connections require equality, not power plays, comment equal or nothing. Subscribe if you think Suk should prove himself through actions, not gifts or threats. Only manipulative, entitled people think money and power are substitutes for genuine respect. Let's see if he can actually show up as just a man, not a mafia boss. The Café Desiree chose was everything the Constellation wasn't. Small, crowded, loud with student conversations and espresso machines. No one looked twice at Suk Myung-soo when he walked in. His expensive coat and carefully styled hair just made him another wealthy soul resident grabbing weekend coffee. Desiree was already there, sitting by the window in jeans and a cream sweater, hair loose around her shoulders instead of the sleek bun she wore for work. She looked younger like this, less guarded. She looked beautiful. You found it, she said when he approached. Your directions were precise. He gestured to her nearly empty cup. Can I get you another? I can buy my own coffee, but thank you. She stood. What are you having? They ordered together, splitting the bill exactly down the middle over his protest. When they sat back down, she said, Equal footing, remember? That includes paying for our own drinks. Noted. You're going to hate this, aren't you? But she was smiling. All the normal, equal, nobody treating you special parts. I'm willing to find out. They talked for 3 hours. About growing up in different worlds, her childhood in the American South, where church was mandatory and family gatherings involved entire extended networks, his childhood in Seoul, where family meant business and gatherings meant territory negotiations. About siblings, her brother's dreams of building sustainable infrastructure in Africa, his older brother's death in a gang war that had pushed Suk into leadership he'd never wanted. You never wanted this life? She asked, understanding dawning. I wanted to study architecture. Design buildings that would last centuries. He'd never told anyone that. But when Hyung died, someone had to take over. Someone had to protect what he'd built. Someone had to make sure his death meant something. And now you're trapped in a life you never chose, holding together an empire you never wanted, becoming someone you might not even like. The accuracy hit like a punch. How do you see these things? Because I almost did the same thing. My fiancé, Marcus, he had this vision of who we'd be together. Power couple, climbing social ladders, building influence. And I kept shaping myself to fit that vision until I didn't recognize myself anymore. When I found out he'd been using me, it hurt, but it was also relief. Because I got to stop performing. Is that what you think I'm doing? Performing? I think everyone performs, Mr. Suk. The question is whether you know who you are when the audience leaves. He wanted to tell her that he hadn't known himself in years, that the performance had become so complete he couldn't find the edges anymore, that sitting here with her, drinking mediocre coffee and having honest conversation, felt more real than anything in his actual life. But admitting that felt like showing weakness to someone who might use it. Except Desiree wasn't interested in his weaknesses. She wanted his truth. I don't know who I am without the business, he admitted finally. It's been 15 years. The role and the person have merged. Then maybe it's time to figure out if they can separate again. She said it gently, without judgment. Or if you even want them to. They left the cafe as afternoon turned to evening, the winter sun already setting. Seoul's streets glowed with neon and headlights, the city transforming into its nighttime self. Walk with me, Suk asked. They wandered through Itaewon streets, past international restaurants and expat bars, through neighborhoods where different languages mixed in the cold air. Desiree pointed out her favorite spots, the West African restaurant where she got jollof rice when she was homesick, the bookstore with an English section where she'd read entire novels while drinking tea, the park where she practiced Korean with elderly women who corrected her pronunciation with patient firmness. She'd built a whole life here that had nothing to do with wealth or power. Small, careful, entirely her own. Don't you get lonely? He asked. No family here, keeping everyone at arm's length, refusing help even when you need it? Sometimes. But lonely is better than trapped. And I'm not as alone as you think. I have friends, community, people I trust because we built that trust slowly without obligation. She looked at him. What about you? All that power, all those people around you, are you less lonely? The question cut deeper than she probably intended. Suk thought about his days surrounded by associates and employees and hangers-on. All those people and not a single real conversation. All that connection and complete isolation. Yes, he admitted. I'm lonelier. They stopped at a pojangmika, a street food tent, and Desiree ordered tteokbokki and fish cakes in fluent Korean, her accent nearly perfect. The ajumma running the stand complimented her language skills and asked how long she'd been in Korea. 18 months, Desiree answered. Your Korean is better than some people who've lived here 10 years. You must practice very hard. Watching Desiree interact with the ajumma, warm, respectful, genuine, Suk realized that she'd done what he never could. She'd entered a foreign world and made herself part of it through effort and respect rather than money or fear. She'd earned her place instead of buying it. She'd done the hard thing the right way. As they ate the spicy rice cakes, sitting on plastic stools in the cold, Desiree asked, Can I ask you something personal? Yes. The violence in your world. How do you justify it to yourself? The question was direct, unflinching. She wasn't asking out of judgment, but genuine curiosity about how he lived with his choices. I tell myself it's necessary, that the system exists whether I'm part of it or not. That my family's organization provides structure, prevents chaos, protects people who can't protect themselves. He met her eyes, but honestly, sometimes I don't justify it. I just do what's necessary and try not to think too hard about whether necessary is the same as right. That sounds exhausting. It is. Then why not walk away? Because hundreds of people depend on the organization for their income. Because rival groups would move into our territory and be less restrained. Because my brother died for this, and walking away would make his death meaningless. He paused, and because I don't know who I'd be without it. Desiree absorbed this silently, and he waited for judgment that never came. Instead, she said, I think you're more than your worst choices, but I also think you're going to have to decide someday whether being more is worth the cost. They parted ways as full dark settled over Seoul. She took the subway toward her apartment. He returned to his car where his driver had been waiting for hours. As Suk rode through the city toward his penthouse, he couldn't stop thinking about two different lives, the one he'd built through violence and fear, and the one Desiree had constructed through patience and integrity. He wanted to believe those lives could intersect. But intersections were just places where different paths briefly touched before diverging again. And he was starting to realize that might not be enough. If you believe people should be judged by their choices, not their circumstances, comment, your choices define you. Hit subscribe if you think Suk needs to do better, not just feel bad about his life. Only people who make excuses for toxic behavior would disagree. The real test is coming. Let's see what he does when his two worlds collide. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday in January. Suk Myung-soo was still awake, reviewing territory reports in his home office, when his phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers at this hour usually meant problems he'd have to handle with violence. But something made him pick up. Mr. Suk. Desiree's voice, tight with controlled fear. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else. Someone's following me. He was already standing, already reaching for his coat. Where are you? Walking home from the restaurant. I took a different route because I felt like, and there's a man. He's been behind me for 4 blocks. When I cross the street, he crosses. When I speed up, he speeds up. Stay on the line. Stay in well-lit areas. I'm coming. He was already heading for the door, phone pressed to his ear. What's your exact location? She gave him the intersection. 12 minutes from his apartment. He made it in 7. When he found her, she was standing under a convenience store's bright lights, phone still to her ear, eyes tracking a figure in a dark jacket who'd stopped half a block away, pretending to look at his own phone. Suk approached her slowly, visibly, making sure both she and her follower could see him. Desiree. The relief on her face was immediate. Thank you for coming. He positioned himself between her and the man, making his presence unmistakable. The figure in the dark jacket looked up, recognized something in Suk's posture or face, and quickly walked away in the opposite direction. Just like that, the threat dissolved. Desiree exhaled shakily. I feel ridiculous. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just walking the same direction. You weren't paranoid. Trust your instincts. He studied her face, reading the adrenaline crash starting to set in. Let me take you home. She nodded, too shaken to argue about independence. In his car, she was quiet, processing. Suk didn't push conversation, just drove carefully through Seoul's late-night streets while she stared out the window, arms wrapped around herself. At her building, a modest structure in a decent neighborhood, she finally spoke. How did you make him leave? You didn't even say anything. He recognized what I am, what I represent. The dangerous part, she said softly, the part that makes people afraid. Yes. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. The same calculation he'd been avoiding for weeks. Come inside, she said finally. I can't sleep yet anyway. And you drove all the way across the city at 2 a.m. The least I can do is offer you tea. Her apartment was small, but carefully curated. Books in English and Korean lined one wall. Photographs of family occupied another. Plants clustered near the window. A Bluetooth speaker sat on a shelf next to a collection of vinyl records she must have brought from America. It was a home, not just a place to sleep. She made tea, some herbal blend that smelled like lavender and chamomile, and they sat on her small couch, the city glowing through her window. Thank you for coming, she said again. I know I said no favors, no obligations, but I was scared and you were the only person I could think of who'd. Who'd what? Who'd come without asking questions. Who'd make me feel safe without making me feel weak for needing help. The trust in those words humbled him. They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, the adrenaline slowly fading. Finally, Desiree asked the question he'd been dreading. What are we doing, Suk? I don't know. We can't keep pretending this is just coffee and conversation. We both know it's more than that. But we also both know it can't work. Why not? She set down her mug with careful precision. Because your world and mine don't mix. Because I've built my life on independence and integrity, and your life requires compromise with things I can't accept. Because even tonight, you saved me, and I'm grateful, but you saved me using the same power and fear that makes your world dangerous in the first place. So what do you want me to do? Walk away from everything I am? I want you to be honest about what you are, and let me decide if I can live with that. The challenge hung between them. No more pretending. No more careful avoidance of hard truths. I run a criminal organization, Suk said bluntly. I've hurt people, ordered violence, made choices that prioritize power over morality. I've built an empire on fear and control, and I'm good at it. That's who I am. And is that who you want to be? I don't know anymore. Before I met you, I didn't question it. It was just survival. But now... He gestured helplessly at the space between them. Now I see what life looks like when it's built differently, and I can't unsee it. Desiree's eyes were wet, but no tears fell. I can't save you, Suk. I can't be your redemption or your escape or your proof that you're still a good person underneath all the violence. That's not fair to either of us. I'm not asking you to save me. Then what are you asking? He didn't have an answer. What did he want? Her presence without changing his life? Her acceptance without earning it? Her love without deserving it? I'm asking, he said slowly, if there's a version of this that doesn't require me to be someone I'm not, but also doesn't require you to compromise who you are. I don't think there is. The words landed with devastating finality. Desiree stood, walked to her window, looked out at Seoul's endless lights. I care about you. The real you. The one who wanted to be an architect and loves honest conversation and feels trapped in a life you never chose. But I can't separate that person from the one who hurts people for business. They're the same person, making different choices depending on context. And I can't build my life around someone whose choices might destroy everything I've worked for. Suk joined her at the window, careful not to touch, respecting the space between them that suddenly felt like an ocean. What if I tried to change? The words came out before he could stop them. Not overnight, not completely, but what if I tried to do things differently? Change for yourself, not for me. Because if you change for me and it doesn't work out, you'll resent me. And if you change for me and it does work out, you'll be living someone else's life again, just like you did when you took over from your brother. She was right. She was always right. I should go, he said quietly. Yeah. Her voice was thick with unshed tears. You should. At her door, he turned back. She was still by the window, backlit by the city, looking small and strong and heartbreakingly sad. Desiree. Yeah. Thank you. For seeing me. For being honest. For not letting me hide from who I am. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Suk left her apartment and walked to his car, where his driver had been waiting in the cold. As they pulled away from her building, he looked back once and saw her silhouette still in the window, watching him leave. He'd wanted her to be his escape. Instead, she'd become his mirror. 3 weeks passed. Suk didn't return to the constellation, didn't call or text, gave Desiree the space she'd implicitly asked for when she'd explained all the ways they couldn't work. But he thought about their conversation constantly, about her question, is that who you want to be? About choices and consequences and whether change was possible or just another form of performance. He started small, redirected resources from protection rackets into legitimate businesses, intervened when his lieutenants wanted to respond to minor slights with violence, asked questions about whether actions were necessary or just habit. Some of his associates noticed the shift, asked if he was going soft. He told them he was being strategic, which was partly true, but mostly he was testing whether he could be someone different. Not for Desiree. She'd been clear that she wouldn't be his motivation, but for himself, to see if the person who wanted to build things instead of control them was still somewhere inside the performance. On a Friday evening in late January, he found himself outside the constellation, not planning to go in, just standing on the street, looking up at those golden lights 63 floors above. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. There's a cafe in Hongdae. Sunday, 2 p.m. Equal footing. If you're still interested in figuring out who you are without the audience. Desiree's number. An invitation. Not a promise, but a possibility. Suk stood in the cold Seoul night. City lights reflecting off glass and steel towers that stretched toward an indifferent sky. His world was up there, power and fear and control. Everything he'd built and everything he'd lost himself to. But maybe there was another world too. One built on different foundations. One where who he was mattered more than what he controlled. He typed back, I'll be there. Then he stood looking up at the constellation for a long moment before turning away, walking toward his car, toward whatever version of himself he might become. The path wasn't clear. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. But for the first time in 15 years, Suk Myung-soo felt like he was choosing his direction instead of just following the role he'd been given. And that was terrifying. And that was hopeful. And that finally was real. If you believe people can change, but only if they do the work themselves, comment, real change takes action. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about characters choosing integrity over easy power. Only people who make excuses for toxic behavior would refuse. Hit the notification bell if you believe everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but has to earn it. This is just the beginning of Suk and Desiree's story. The real question is, will he prove himself or will power win again? Stay tuned.
You made it to the end. Thank you. Truly, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for staying with Suk and Desiree's story, for investing your time, your emotions, your attention in these characters we've poured our souls into creating. Now, I'm going to be completely